What would you do if you woke up tomorrow and discovered that your spouse had systematically erased your entire existence? Your bank accounts? Empty. Your home? No longer yours. Your own children? Turned against you by carefully crafted lies. And worst of all, the courts, the police, everyone believes you're the crazy one. This isn't a thriller movie plot. This is exactly what happened to Rachel Morrison, a woman who spent 20 years building an $800 million empire alongside her husband, only to be left with $50,000 in supervised visits with her daughter. But here's where this story takes a turn that nobody, especially her ex-husband, saw coming. While serving coffee at a truck stop diner at 3 a.m., while being mocked by her former friends, while watching her daughter walk past her in shame, Rachel was quietly documenting something that would not only destroy her ex-husband's empire, but land her a $100 million whistleblower reward. What she uncovered wasn't just financial fraud, it was murder. Multiple murders. And the real villain wasn't even who she thought it was. In the next hour, you're going to hear how one woman went from having everything stolen from her, her money, her reputation, her own child, to signing the biggest whistleblower check in SEC history in the very same courthouse where she lost everything. If you think you know how this ends, I promise you don't. So grab your headphones, get comfortable, and prepare for a story that will make you question everything you thought you knew about divorce, justice, and revenge. And if this story moves you, if it makes you think of someone who needs to hear that they're not alone in their fight, hit that subscribe button and share this video. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is let others know that rising from the ashes is possible. Let's begin. Rachel Morrison stood frozen in her kitchen, gripping her coffee mug so tightly her knuckles turned white. The morning sun streamed through the windows of their 7-bedroom estate in Westchester County, casting long shadows across the Italian marble countertops she'd personally selected 5 years ago during better times. On her daughter Emma's phone screen, Ashley Winters smiled brilliantly at a financial news anchor, her perfectly veneered teeth gleaming as she discussed her role as the new strategic development director at Morrison Real Estate Development. "We're seeing incredible growth in the luxury sector," Ashley was saying, her voice honeyed with false modesty. "Michael Morrison has built something truly special here, and I'm honored to be part of his vision for the future." But it wasn't Ashley's presence that made Rachel's world tilt on its axis. It wasn't even the way she casually touched her throat as she spoke, drawing attention like a practiced seductress. It was the sapphire necklace gleaming there. 3 pristine salon sapphires surrounded by diamonds in an Art Deco setting. Rachel's grandmother's necklace, a piece that had survived the Depression, 2 wars, and countless family upheavals. The one Michael had reported stolen 6 months ago, filing an insurance claim for $200,000. "Mom, isn't that—" Emma began, her 14-year-old face scrunched in confusion as she zoomed in on the live stream with trembling fingers. "Go to your room," Rachel whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. "But Mom, that's Grandma Ellen's necklace. Dad said it was stolen when we were in the Hamptons." He said, "Now, Emma, please." As her daughter retreated upstairs, her footsteps heavy with reluctance, Rachel sank into one of the custom-upholstered kitchen chairs. 20 years of marriage. 20 years of being the silent partner, the invisible force behind Michael Morrison's meteoric rise from a small-time contractor to a real estate mogul worth $800 million. She'd been 22 when they met, fresh out of Columbia with a degree in business and dreams of conquering Wall Street. He'd been 25, all swagger and ambition, running a failing construction company that his father had left him. She remembered their first date, how he'd taken her to a hole-in-the-wall Italian place because he couldn't afford anything better. How he'd admitted over cheap Chianti that he was 3 months from bankruptcy. She remembered staying up all night with him, restructuring his debt, identifying inefficiencies, creating a business plan that would save his company. She remembered the look in his eyes when the plan worked, gratitude mixed with something else she hadn't recognized then: possession. The divorce papers arrived 3 days later, hand-delivered by a process server who avoided eye contact as Rachel signed for them. She sat at the same kitchen table where she'd helped Michael build his empire, reading through the dense legal language that dissolved 2 decades with clinical precision. The grounds were irreconcilable differences: that catch-all phrase that meant everything and nothing. But attached to the filing was something worse, a psychiatric evaluation from Dr. Richard Hayes, a man Rachel had never met, claiming she'd been his patient for the past year. The evaluation was damning. Persistent delusional disorder with paranoid features. Narcissistic personality traits manifesting in grandiose fantasies about professional contributions. Potential risk to minor children due to unstable emotional regulation. Rachel's hands shook as she read. This wasn't just a divorce, it was character assassination. Her lawyer, Tom Bradley, was an overworked public defender she'd found through legal aid, the only one she could afford after Michael had frozen their joint accounts. He met her at a Starbucks because he didn't have an office, his cheap suit shiny at the elbows, his briefcase held together with duct tape. "Mrs. Morrison, I'll be honest," he said, reviewing the papers over a lukewarm latte. "This is bad. They have medical documentation, witness statements from household staff, even a report from your daughter's school expressing concerns about your behavior." "None of this is real," Rachel insisted. "I've never met this doctor. I've never had any incidents at Emma's school. The household staff, Maria and James, they've worked for us for 15 years. They would never—" "They did," Tom said gently. "I've seen their affidavits. Mrs. Morrison, is it possible you've been experiencing some memory issues? Stress can cause—" "Stop." Rachel stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "I'm not crazy. This is Michael. This is what he does. He doesn't just win, he obliterates." Tom's expression was sympathetic but unconvinced. She saw it then, the future unspooling before her. No one would believe her. Michael had spent months, maybe years, building this narrative. She was the unstable wife. He was the long-suffering husband. The custody evaluation happened 2 weeks later. Dr. Patricia Hawkins, a court-appointed psychologist with 30 years of experience, interviewed Rachel for 3 hours. The questions seemed reasonable at first, about Emma's routine, her education, her emotional needs, but they grew progressively more invasive. "Mrs. Morrison, your husband's attorney has provided documentation of several incidents. Can you explain what happened on March 15th? "I don't know what you're referring to." "The incident at the country club. Multiple witnesses reported you had an emotional breakdown." "That never happened. I was at the club that day for a charity luncheon I organized. It raised $300,000 for childhood cancer research." Dr. Hawkins made a note. "Interesting. The report says you claim to have organized the event, but the official records show Mrs. Ashley Winters as the organizer." Rachel felt the ground shifting beneath her. "That's impossible. I have emails, planning documents." "We'll need to see those." But when Rachel went home to retrieve them, her laptop was gone. Her files, her email account, everything vanished. Michael stood in his study, the laptop in pieces on his desk. "It had a virus," he said calmly. "I had to destroy it. Company security protocols. You understand." She understood perfectly. The courtroom in White Plains was a monument to judicial authority, dark wood paneling, towering ceilings, and a judge's bench that seemed to loom over everything like a mountain. Judge Harrison Clark, a man in his 70s with the demeanor of someone who'd seen too much and cared too little, reviewed the stack of documents before him with mechanical precision. Rachel sat beside Tom Bradley, wearing her last good suit, a navy blue ensemble she'd bought 3 years ago for a charity gala. Across the aisle, Michael commanded a small army of lawyers from Sterling, Whitman, and Associates, the most ruthless family law firm in New York. David Sterling himself, a man who'd destroyed more marriages than infidelity and boredom combined, led the team. "Your Honor," Sterling began, his voice carrying the kind of confidence that came from never losing, "we're seeking full custody of the minor child, Emma Morrison, age 14. The evidence clearly demonstrates that Mrs. Morrison is suffering from significant mental health issues that make her an unfit parent." He presented his case like a conductor leading an orchestra. First came Dr. Hayes, silver-haired and distinguished, testifying about Rachel's treatment with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this before. "Mrs. Morrison exhibits classic signs of delusional thinking," he said, consulting notes that Rachel knew were fabricated. She has consistently claimed credit for her husband's business success, despite having no formal role in his company. She's shown paranoid ideation, believing in elaborate conspiracies against her. Most concerning is her inability to recognize these delusions as false. "I've never met this man," Rachel whispered urgently to Tom. "Don't," Tom whispered back. "Outbursts make you look unstable." Next came Maria, their housekeeper of 15 years. Rachel had attended her daughter's wedding, had helped her son get into college. Now Maria wouldn't meet her eyes as she testified about Rachel's erratic behavior and mood swings. There were days when Mrs. Morrison wouldn't leave her room, Maria said, her accent thicker than usual, a sign Rachel recognized as nervousness. She would stay in bed, crying. Other days, she would be manic, reorganizing everything, making impossible demands. It was a masterful performance. Every normal human emotion Rachel had experienced over 2 decades was reframed as pathology. Her grief when her mother died became depressive episodes. Her enthusiasm for Emma's school projects became manic behavior. Her frustration with Michael's late nights became paranoid delusions. Tom's cross-examination was weak, apologetic, as if he was afraid of appearing too aggressive. Rachel watched her life being rewritten in real time, powerless to stop it. The financial testimony was almost an afterthought. Michael's accountant presented the prenuptial agreement Rachel had signed 20 years ago, 7 months pregnant and deeply in love. "The terms are clear," the accountant said. "In the event of divorce, Mrs. Morrison is entitled to $50,000, the amount she brought into the marriage adjusted for inflation." "That's not possible," Rachel said, louder than intended. "I contributed." "Mrs. Morrison," Judge Clark warned, "you'll have your opportunity to testify." But when that opportunity came, it was too late. The narrative was set. Rachel was the delusional wife who'd imagined herself a business partner. Her testimony about midnight strategy sessions, about code she'd written for Michael's first property management system, about connections she'd leveraged from her Columbia network, it all sounded exactly like what Dr. Hayes had predicted. Grandiose delusions. "Mrs. Morrison," Sterling asked during cross-examination, "do you have any documentation of these supposed contributions?" "My laptop was destroyed." "How convenient. Any witnesses to these midnight strategy sessions?" "Michael and I were alone." "So no witnesses. Any employment records showing you worked for Morrison Development?" "I wasn't officially employed, but..." "So no records. Mrs. Morrison, isn't it true that you're simply a bitter woman trying to claim credit for your successful husband's achievements?" "No, that's not..." "Isn't it true that you've been unemployed for 20 years?" "I was raising our daughter, supporting Michael's. A yes or no answer, please. Have you been employed?" "No, but..." "No further questions." The custody decision was swift and brutal. Judge Clark's words fell like hammers. "The court finds clear and convincing evidence that Mrs. Morrison is currently unable to provide a stable environment for the minor child. Full legal and physical custody is awarded to Mr. Morrison. Mrs. Morrison is granted supervised visitation, 2 hours monthly, at a court-approved facility." Rachel heard Emma crying in the hallway. They'd made her wait outside, protecting her from the proceedings. But there was no protection from the result. "Mom!" Emma broke free from the court officer, running to Rachel. "Mom, please, don't let them take me." Michael stepped forward, his expression a mask of concern. "Emma, sweetheart, your mother is sick. She needs help. This is for the best." "She's not sick. You're lying. Mom, tell them." But the court officers were already separating them, professionally gentle but implacable. Rachel reached for her daughter, their fingers touching for just a moment before the distance became unbridgeable. "I love you," Rachel called out. "Emma, I love you. This isn't over." "Don't confuse the child," Sterling said coldly. "Your visitation rights can be revoked entirely if you continue to cause distress." The financial settlement was finalized the same day. $50,000. For 20 years of marriage, 15 years of building an empire. For her youth and dreams and invisible labor. The check was handed to her along with a court order to vacate the marital home within 7 days. Michael didn't even stay to watch her leave. He was already at his victory dinner. Photos appearing on Instagram within hours. Ashley Winters beside him, wearing not just the sapphire necklace, but also Rachel's wedding ring, reset with additional diamonds. The studio apartment in Queens was 450 square feet of water-stained ceiling and peeling linoleum. The radiator clanged like a ghost in chains, and the single window faced a brick wall so close Rachel could touch it if she opened the window and reached out. The rent was $1,800 a month, more than a third of her settlement money gone just for first month, last month, and security deposit. Rachel sat on the floor. She didn't have furniture yet, surrounded by 7 cardboard boxes containing everything the court had deemed her personal property. Clothes, mostly. Some books. Photo albums that Michael's lawyers had considered worthless. Her laptop had been returned, wiped clean, a shell of circuits in plastic without memory. The first week was about basic survival. She bought a mattress from a discount store, hauling it up 3 flights of stairs herself because delivery cost extra. She acquired dishes from Goodwill, a coffee maker from a yard sale. She ate ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches, calculating every penny. The second week she tried to find work. Her resume was a ghost story, a Columbia business degree from 20 years ago. Then nothing. A 2-decade gap that might as well have been a criminal record. "So, Mrs. Morrison," said the 20-something recruiter at a staffing agency, her voice perky with manufactured enthusiasm. "What have you been doing for the past 20 years?" "I was supporting my husband's business. Unofficial consulting, strategic planning, but no official position, no portfolio, no references." "My ex-husband." Oh, the recruiter's expression shifted, pity mixed with discomfort. "Well, perhaps we could start you with some entry-level positions. Reception work, data entry." "I have a degree from Columbia. I helped build an $800 million company." "Without documentation, I'm afraid that's just, well, it's just words, isn't it?" After the 15th rejection, Rachel stopped trying to explain. She applied for whatever she could, cashier positions, administrative assistant roles, anything. But even those required recent experience, references, a work history that didn't have a 20-year hole. The money was disappearing faster than she'd imagined. $50,000 had seemed like so much when she'd never had to think about money. But rent, utilities, food, Metro cards. The lawyer she couldn't afford but needed to fight for her daughter, it evaporated like water in the desert. 3 months after the divorce, Rachel stood outside Metro Diner at 10:45 at night, smoothing down a polyester uniform that smelled like someone else's cigarettes. The night manager, Tony, was a man in his 50s who'd seen enough hard luck cases to recognize another one. "You ever wait tables before?" he asked, not really caring about the answer. "In college," Rachel lied. "Good enough. 11 to 7 shift, minimum wage plus tips. Don't steal, don't do drugs in the bathroom. Show up on time. Can you handle that?" "Yes." "You start now." The first night was a disaster. She confused orders, dropped a tray of drinks, gave a trucker regular coffee instead of decaf, and had to endure his 20-minute tirade about insomnia. Her feet ached in the non-slip shoes that didn't fit right. Her back screamed from carrying heavy trays. But she smiled, apologized, kept moving. Around 3 in the morning, during the dead time when only the lost and desperate haunted 24-hour diners, she was wiping down tables when a group of women came in. She recognized them immediately. Jennifer Walsh, Margaret Stern, Linda Patterson. The charity committee from the country club, women she'd brunched with monthly for 15 years. Rachel turned away, hoping the dimmed lights and her pulled-back hair would be enough disguise. But Jennifer's voice carried. "Oh my God, is that Rachel Morrison?" They whispered among themselves, stealing glances. Rachel forced herself to approach their table, order pad in hand. "Good evening, ladies. What can I get you?" Jennifer looked through her as if she were invisible. Margaret busied herself with the sticky menu. Linda, always the cruelest under her southern charm, smiled sweetly. "Just coffee, black. Though I'm not sure I trust the quality at a place like this." She looked Rachel up and down. Standards have clearly fallen everywhere. They left a penny tip. On the receipt, Linda had written, "Get help." Rachel pocketed the penny. She'd need every cent. 3 months into her graveyard shifts at Metro Diner, Rachel had learned to navigate the nighttime ecosystem of the forgotten. There were the truckers who called her honey, but tipped well if she kept their coffee full. The sex workers taking breaks between clients who were kinder than any country club lady had ever been. The insomniacs and third shifters, the drunk kids from NYU stumbling in at 4 a.m., the homeless regulars Tony had let sit in the back booth as long as they ordered something every few hours. She'd developed a routine: work 11 to 7, sleep 8 to 2, spend afternoons at the public library applying for jobs on their computers, each application disappearing into the digital void. Visit Emma for her supervised 2 hours once a month, watching her daughter grow more distant with each meeting, poisoned by whatever Michael whispered in her ears. It was a Tuesday night in February, snow turning to slush on the streets outside, when Sarah Coleman first walked into Metro Diner. She stood in the doorway for a moment, expensive coat dripping, looking lost in the way only the recently traumatized can look, as if the world had fundamentally shifted and nothing was where it should be. "Sit anywhere you like," Rachel called out from behind the counter. Sarah chose the corner booth, the one with the broken spring in the seat that regulars knew to avoid. She was beautiful in an austere way: sharp cheekbones, prematurely gray streaks in her black hair, eyes that seemed to catalog everything. "Coffee black," Sarah said when Rachel approached. "And whatever pie you have." "Apple. It's always apple." "Then apple it is." Rachel brought the order, noticing Sarah's hands trembling slightly as she lifted the mug. It was none of her business, but something about the woman's controlled desperation felt familiar. "Rough night?" Rachel asked, the question slipping out. Sarah looked up, really looked at her, studying Rachel's face with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. "You could say that. My husband's been missing for 3 weeks." She laughed, bitter and short. "The FBI says he ran. Classic pattern: crime discovered, assets liquidated, flee to non-extradition country. They've seen it 100 times. You don't believe them?" "Robert wouldn't run. He'd fight. He was—" Sarah paused, choosing words carefully. "He was building a case against his employer. He found discrepancies, fraud, money laundering, hundreds of millions flowing through shell companies. He was going to the authorities. And then—" She snapped her fingers. "Gone. Car at JFK, passport missing, our accounts emptied." "Which company?" Rachel heard herself asking, though she already knew the answer. "Morrison Development." Rachel's hands stilled on the coffee pot. Sarah noticed. "You know the company?" "You could say that." Sarah studied her more carefully, and Rachel saw the moment of recognition dawn. "You're Rachel Morrison, Michael Morrison's ex-wife." "Just Ray now. I pour coffee." "No," Sarah said slowly. "You're the woman who helped build that empire. Robert talked about you. He said the early algorithms, the property analysis systems that made Morrison Development so successful, he said they had an elegance that Michael Morrison couldn't have created. He was a salesman, not a mathematician." Rachel set the coffee pot down, slid into the opposite side of the booth. "Your husband said that?" "Robert was a forensic accountant before he became CFO. He could read code like poetry, see patterns in numbers like they were music. He said someone brilliant built Morrison's foundation, then disappeared." Sarah pulled out a flash drive, set it on the table between them. "He documented everything before he vanished, but it's encrypted, complex, layered. I can't crack it, but maybe someone who understood Morrison's systems from the beginning could." "Why would you trust me?" "Because Michael Morrison destroyed your life publicly, thoroughly. If you were still allied with him, you wouldn't be serving coffee at 3 a.m. in Queen." Sarah pushed the drive closer. "And because I think you want to know the truth as much as I do." Rachel palmed the drive. "I have a laptop, barely functional, but it works. That's all we need." They met the next afternoon in Rachel's studio apartment. Sarah's expression didn't change at the water stains, the rattling radiator, the mattress on the floor. She simply sat cross-legged on the thin carpet and watched as Rachel worked. The encryption was sophisticated but familiar. Robert Coleman had used a variation of the same algorithm Rachel had created 15 years ago for Morrison Development's first secure client database. She recognized her own mathematical signature like a painter recognizing their brushstrokes. Your husband was brilliant, Rachel said as the files began opening. He reverse engineered my entire system, improved on it. He was obsessed with your work, said you were a ghost in the machine, erased but still present in every elegant solution. The documents were damning. Shell companies layered like Russian dolls, money flowing from development projects to offshore accounts, to political campaigns and back again. But worse were the signatures, Rachel's signatures on documents dated after the divorce, authorizing transfers she'd never made. He's been setting me up retroactively, Rachel breathed, making me the architect of the fraud. Robert found more, Sarah said, opening another folder. Look at the dates. Rachel looked. The fraud went back 20 years to the very beginning. Every project she'd helped plan, every innovation she'd created, had been built on dirty money and false foundations. I helped build a criminal empire, she said quietly. No, you built a real company. They built the criminal enterprise around it. Sarah leaned forward. Rachel, we can expose this, but we need more than documents. We need someone on the inside. Over the next 3 weeks, Rachel and Sarah met in secret, piecing together the puzzle of Morrison Development's criminal architecture. They worked in the public library, in all-night laundromats, anywhere with Wi-Fi and anonymity. Sarah had taken leave from her job, living off savings, driven by the need to find out what happened to Robert. It was during one of these late-night sessions that James Mitchell walked into Metro Diner. Rachel recognized him immediately. James from Columbia Business School, her study partner, who'd gone on to found 3 successful companies and now ran a venture capital firm worth $2 billion. He looked exactly the same, as if money had stopped time. Perfect teeth, perfect hair, perfect suit even at 2 in the morning. Rachel Morrison, he said, sliding into her section. I heard you were working here. It's Ray now, she said flatly, pouring coffee without being asked. What do you want, James? To offer you a job, a real job. Rachel laughed, sharp and bitter. Right, because my reputation is so sterling. Your reputation was assassinated by a narcissist with good lawyers. Anyone who matters knows that. He pulled out a tablet, swiped to a presentation. Look at this. Despite herself, Rachel looked. It was a business plan for a network of co-working spaces designed for the gig economy. Not just desks and Wi-Fi, but integrated services. Childcare, meal prep, professional development, mental health support. The traditional office is dead, James said, but people still need community, structure, support. This provides all of that, affordably, flexibly. Co-working spaces already exist. Not like this. This is holistic. This recognizes that gig workers aren't just workers. They're parents. They're humans with complex needs. He leaned forward. I need someone who understands both business and desperation. Someone who's been knocked down and knows what people need to get back up. Why me? Because you're brilliant and you're available. And because a comeback story is great marketing. He named a number. 6 figures, equity stake, full benefits. You'd be chief operating officer. Rachel wanted to say no. Every instinct screamed trap. But 6 figures meant lawyers, real lawyers, to fight for Emma. It meant evidence she could gather from inside the business world Michael dominated. I need to think about it. Think fast. I want to launch in 3 months. She talked it over with Sarah that night in the laundromat that had become their unofficial office. It's too convenient, Sarah said. James Mitchell just happens to appear right when you need money most. I know, but what if it's real? What if I can rebuild? Then rebuild, but watch your back. Rachel accepted the next day. What followed were the best 3 months she'd had since the divorce. She threw herself into creating haven spaces with desperate energy. She negotiated leases on abandoned retail spaces, designed modular systems that could transform from conference room to yoga studio to quiet workspace in minutes. She hired staff, mostly women who'd been knocked down themselves, who understood the mission viscerally. The work was exhausting but exhilarating. For the first time in years, she was building something that was purely hers. Not Michael's vision that she enabled, but her vision, her execution. Emma even started texting again. Cautiously, briefly, but it was contact. Saw the article about Haven Spaces in TechCrunch. Proud of you, Mom. 4 words that made everything worthwhile. The grand opening exceeded every expectation. The space was packed with freelancers, remote workers, small business owners. Mayor Patricia Hughes cut the ribbon. Journalists from The Times, The Journal, and various tech blogs circulated, interviewing users who gushed about finally finding what they needed. "This is revolutionary," said Jennifer Walsh, not the country club Jennifer, but the head of remote work initiatives for Goldman Sachs. "We'd like to discuss a partnership immediately." Rachel stood in the center of her creation, watching people work, collaborate, thrive. She touched her grandmother's bracelet, the only jewelry she'd kept, hidden during the divorce. She'd done it. She'd rebuilt. The health department arrived during the investor lunch the next day. The health department raid was surgical in its precision. 6 inspectors arrived simultaneously, as if choreographed, spreading through Haven Spaces with clipboards and cameras. The lead inspector, a man named Harrison with dead eyes and mechanical movements, announced to the room full of investors and journalists that they'd received credible reports of multiple violations. "Everyone needs to evacuate immediately," he said. "This is an active investigation." Rachel watched 3 months of work crumble in real time. The investors, who'd been minutes from signing partnership deals, fled like roaches when lights turned on. The journalists, smelling blood, stayed to document the disaster. "This has to be a mistake," James said, but his face had gone pale, and something in his expression wasn't surprise. It was resignation. The inspectors found violations that didn't exist. They cited codes that had been changed that morning. They shut down systems that had passed inspection the week before. It was a hit job executed with bureaucratic precision that only money could buy. "Who reported us?" Rachel demanded. Harrison didn't look up from his clipboard. "That's confidential." Within hours, the story dominated tech news. TechCrunch's headline was devastating. "Desperate divorcees delusions tank startup. James Mitchell's Haven Spaces built on lies." The article was brutal, quoting sources close to the situation, who painted Rachel as unstable, incompetent, a charity case James had tried to help who'd manipulated him with sob stories. But the worst part was the final paragraph. "James Mitchell has already filed incorporation papers for Workflow, an identical concept that will launch next month without the baggage of failed leadership." Rachel confronted James in his office that evening. Security had already there to escort her out. "Every meeting," she said, her voice deadly calm. "You recorded every meeting." He wouldn't meet her eyes. "It's business, Rachel. You were never going to let me succeed. This was always the plan. Let me build it, then take it. You're paranoid, classic symptom according to your psychological evaluation. You've been talking to Michael." Finally, James looked up, and his boyish charm was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating. "Michael didn't need to tell me anything. Your failure was public, thorough, but he did share some useful insights about managing you. Very helpful." "Managing me? You're brilliant, Rachel, but you're also broken. Broken people are easy to manipulate. They're so desperate for redemption, they'll believe anything." He gestured to security. "Your access has been revoked. Your equity is void. Check the fine print about conduct detrimental to the company. You've been fired for cause. This is illegal. Sue me. Oh, wait, you can't afford to." As security escorted her out, Rachel saw the plans for Workflow on James's screen. Her designs, her innovations, her solutions, all with his name attached. Back in her studio apartment, Rachel sat in the dark, not bothering with lights. Her phone buzzed with notifications, former employees asking what happened, Emma asking if the news was true, reporters wanting comments. She ignored them all. Sarah arrived at midnight with Chinese food and a laptop. "I tracked the health department report," she said without preamble. "It was filed by Ashley Winters on behalf of Morrison Development. They're claiming Haven Spaces was too close to one of their properties, creating unfair competition. There's no Morrison property within 10 blocks. There is now. They bought the building next door yesterday, backdated the papers." Rachel laughed, hollow and bitter. "Of course they did. There's more, Stick." Sarah pulled up social media. Look what Ashley posted. Why, it was a video compilation cleverly edited. Rachel at school events over the years, looking disheveled. She'd been up all night with sick Emma. Appearing drunk, she'd had dental surgery that morning. Seeming aggressive, she'd been defending Emma from a bully. The caption read, "The truth about Emma Morrison's mom. Mental illness is real. Children deserve better." The video had gone viral. Hundreds of thousands of views, tens of thousands of shares. The comments were vicious. Strangers dissecting her parenting, her mental state, her right to exist. Emma had stopped responding to texts. Rachel discovered the true depth of her fall on a Thursday afternoon in March. She'd gone to Emma's school, standing across the street just to catch a glimpse of her daughter. She knew it was pathetic, possibly illegal given the custody arrangement, but she couldn't help herself. 3 weeks had passed since Emma had stopped responding to texts, since the viral video had transformed Rachel from a private failure into a public spectacle. The final bell rang at 3:15. Students poured out, and there was Emma, taller than Rachel remembered, her hair cut short in a style Rachel would never have chosen. She was walking with a group of girls Rachel recognized from birthday parties and sleepovers in better times. "Oh my God," one of the girls said loudly, pointing. "Is that her? Emma's crazy mom?" The one from the video? She's literally stalking her own kid. So creepy. Emma's face flushed red. She hunched her shoulders, walking faster, but one of her friends grabbed her arm. "Emma, should we call the cops? This is like harassment." Emma looked directly at Rachel then, and the expression on her face, embarrassment, anger, maybe even hate, was worse than any court judgment. She turned away without a word, practically running toward the waiting SUV where Michael's driver waited. That evening, Michael posted photos on Instagram from Emma's parent-teacher conference. Ashley beside him in a conservative navy dress and pearls, shaking hands with Emma's algebra teacher. The caption, "Proud to provide stability for our children during difficult times." Our children. Rachel threw her phone across the room. It hit the wall and cracked but didn't break. Even her rage couldn't afford to destroy things. Sarah visited that night, bringing whiskey this time instead of Chinese food. "They're escalating," she said. "This isn't just about humiliation anymore. They're building a narrative." "For what?" Sarah pulled out a folder thick with documents. "These are internal Morrison development memos from 2 years ago. Your signature is on all of them, approving transfers to offshore accounts totaling $50 million. I never signed these." "I know, but they're good forgeries. Good enough for a jury." Sarah poured 2 glasses of whiskey. "Rachel, you need to go to the FBI. Get ahead of this." "With what credibility? I'm the crazy ex-wife who stalks her kid and destroys businesses." "With evidence. Robert's files plus what I've gathered. It's enough to start an investigation." "Sarah, they own judges, prosecutors. You think the FBI is clean?" "Some of them are. Agent Patricia Stone, she's been investigating Morrison development for years but could never get anyone inside to turn. You could be that person." Rachel drank the whiskey in one burning swallow. "I'll think about it." She didn't have to think long. The next morning, another video surfaced, this one showing Rachel at the diner, seemingly pocketing money from the register. It was edited, fake, but convincing enough. Tony had to fire her. "I'm sorry, Ray," he said, genuinely sad. "Corporate saw the video. Their hands are tied. It's doctored. You know I would never." "I know, but they don't care about truth, just liability." Unemployed, unemployable, and running out of money, Rachel made the decision. She would go to the FBI. The field office in Lower Manhattan was a fortress of glass and steel, security so tight Rachel was searched 3 times before reaching the interview room. Agent Patricia Stone looked exactly like her name, gray hair pulled back severely, gray suit, gray eyes that seemed to see through skin to the soul beneath. "Mrs. Morrison," she said, reviewing the stack of documents Rachel and Sarah had compiled. "This is substantial. If verified, we're looking at RICO charges, money laundering, potentially murder if Robert Coleman's disappearance was—" She trailed off. "But you understand, your signature is on many of these documents. They're forgeries. Can you prove that? Can you prove they're not?" Stone almost smiled. "That's not how the law works, unfortunately. But I'm interested, very interested. Give us 48 hours to verify some of this. Don't leave town. Rachel was leaving the FBI building, feeling something dangerously close to hope, when Marcus Thompson appeared at her elbow. Mrs. Morrison, interesting meeting. Rachel's blood chilled. How did you? I make it my business to know things. He handed her a business card, expensive stock, minimalist design. Your ex-husband cost me $50 million last year with forged environmental reports on the Budapest project. I think we might have aligned interests. I'm not interested in revenge. No, then what do you call this? He gestured toward the FBI building. Justice, the system is rigged, Mrs. Morrison, but together we could unrig it. Every instinct screamed danger, but Rachel was drowning and Marcus was offering a hand up. She took the card. Marcus Thompson's office occupied the entire top floor of a building in Tribeca, all exposed brick and industrial fixtures that screamed calculated authenticity. Unlike Michael's sterile glass tower, this space was warm, inviting, dangerous in its comfort. Marcus poured 2 glasses of bourbon without asking. Pappy Van Winkle 23-year, the kind that cost more per ounce than Rachel now made in a week. Let me be direct, he said, settling into a leather chair that probably cost more than her annual rent. Michael Morrison has built his empire on crimes that should put him away for 30 years. But he's protected. Judges, prosecutors, city officials. The FBI investigation will disappear unless we force their hand. How do you know about the FBI investigation? Marcus smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. I know everything that happens in New York real estate. It's how I've survived this long. He pulled out a tablet, swiping through financial projections and property analyses. I'm launching 3 developments specifically designed to undercut Morrison's biggest projects. But I need inside knowledge, his methods, his vulnerabilities, his patterns. I've been divorced for a year. I don't know his current, but you know him. 20 years of marriage teaches you someone's weaknesses. Marcus leaned forward. I'm offering you a partnership, 20% equity in Thompson Development's new subsidiary. Help me destroy him financially. Make him desperate enough to make mistakes, and you'll have enough money to fight for your daughter. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't. But what's your alternative? You're unemployed, nearly broke, and about to be framed for crimes you didn't commit. He slid a contract across the desk. At least with me, you have a chance. Rachel read the contract carefully, her business school training flickering back to life. It was legitimate, surprisingly fair. 20% of a $100 million subsidiary. Enough to hire real lawyers to fight for Emma to rebuild again. What exactly do you need from me? Information, analysis, your understanding of how he thinks. Marcus refilled her bourbon. For instance, his relationship with Commissioner Bradley. I know there's something there, but not what. Rachel hesitated, then decided. If she was going to make a deal with the devil, she might as well get her money's worth. Bradley's son. Michael paid for rehab twice, covered up a DUI that would have destroyed the kid's medical school applications. Bradley owes him everything. Marcus's smile was predatory. Beautiful. What else? They worked through the night, Rachel providing insights into Michael's psychology, his patterns, his weaknesses, how he always overextended in the third quarter, believing his own hype, how he couldn't resist humiliating competitors personally, making enemies where he should have made allies, how his ego was both his greatest strength and his fatal flaw. He needs to be seen as generous, Rachel explained, but only when everyone's watching. He'll donate millions to charity publicly, but won't pay his contractors until they threaten to sue. Interesting. And Ashley Winters? A vulnerability he doesn't recognize. She's smarter than he thinks, more ambitious. She's playing him, but he's too arrogant to see it. Marcus made notes in a leather journal, old school in a digital world. You're more valuable than I expected, Mrs. Morrison. It's Ms. Vance now. Morrison was never really my name anyway. 2 weeks later, their plan was in motion. Marcus had used Rachel's intelligence to outmaneuver Michael on 3 major deals, underbidding by exactly enough to win without raising suspicions. Morrison Development's stock began to slide. Then the FBI arrested Rachel. It happened at Emma's birthday party, the one Rachel wasn't invited to but watched from across the street like a ghost haunting her own life. She saw Emma blow out 15 candles through the window, saw Michael and Ashley singing, saw the normalcy she'd never have again. The FBI surrounded her without warning. Rachel Morrison, you're under arrest for money laundering, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit racketeering. What? I came to you. I'm cooperating. Agent Stone's face was impassive, off and on. New evidence has surfaced. Your passwords, your digital signatures, transfers from your IP address. I'm sorry, but the evidence is overwhelming. Through the police car window, Rachel saw Michael watching from his doorway. He mouthed words slowly, deliberately. You did this to yourself. Emma appeared beside him, and for a moment Rachel thought she might defend her, might cry out. But Emma just turned away, walking back into the house, into her new life that didn't include Rachel. Bail was set at $500,000. Rachel had nothing. Marcus Thompson posted it the next morning. They're trying to bury you, he said, driving her away from the courthouse in his Bentley. But they just made a mistake. What mistake? They have everything. Signatures, passwords, digital trails. All of which appeared overnight. Too much evidence, too fast. Someone panicked. He handed her a new phone. From now on, we document everything. Every meeting, every conversation. We're going to prove this was a frame job. Back in Marcus's office, they worked with new urgency. He'd assembled a team, forensic accountants, former FBI agents, hackers who operated in legal gray areas. The walls became covered with documents. Timelines, connections mapped like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. Then Rachel found the photo. The photograph was buried in a folder of charity event images from the previous year. Marcus Thompson and Michael Morrison at a golf tournament, laughing together like old friends. The timestamp showed it was taken just 1 month ago, when Marcus was supposedly plotting Michael's destruction. Find what you need? Marcus's voice came from the doorway. Rachel spun around. He wasn't alone. Michael stood beside him, both men wearing identical expressions of smug satisfaction. Hello, darling, Michael said. Enjoying your partnership? The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. You're working together. We've always been working together, Marcus said, dropping his concerned mentor act. Michael needed someone to take the fall for his financial crimes. You needed someone to trust after James betrayed you. I provided both. Every meeting was recorded, Michael added, pulling out his phone. Every word about destroying me, about Commissioner Bradley, about using inside information to undercut deals. Corporate espionage, conspiracy, fraud. You've confessed to all of it. You set me up from the beginning. From before the beginning, Michael corrected. The divorce, Dr. Hayes, the custody evaluation, that was just phase 1. James Mitchell, I introduced him to you 20 years ago, remember? At that Columbia alumni event. He's been my friend since prep school. Rachel felt the floor tilting beneath her. Sarah Coleman? Is exactly who she says she is, Marcus said. Her husband really did disappear after finding evidence. We had nothing to do with that, happy accident. But we knew you'd trust another victim. Why? Rachel asked, though she already knew. Because you tried to leave me, Michael said simply. No one leaves me. No one embarrasses me. I could have let you disappear quietly, but you had to fight, had to try to rebuild. He stepped closer. I own this city, Rachel. Every judge, every prosecutor, every business leader. You never had a chance. The FBI will receive an anonymous package tomorrow with evidence of your crimes going back 15 years. Your signatures on documents, your passwords accessing accounts, security footage of you meeting with Marcus to plan corporate sabotage. Michael smiled. Even this conversation is being edited as we speak. By tomorrow, it will show you confessing to everything while we tried to stop you. They left her standing in the office, surrounded by evidence of her own manipulation. Every document she'd gathered, every piece of intelligence she'd shared, would be used against her. But they'd made one mistake. They'd underestimated her again. Rachel pulled out the phone Marcus had given her, not to call anyone, but to access the cloud storage where everything had been automatically uploaded. Every conversation, every meeting. Marcus hadn't known she'd jailbroken the phone, added her own recording software. She had them both on tape admitting to the conspiracy. She had 48 hours before they realized their mistake. The second arrest came at Emma's school concert. Rachel had gone just to hear her daughter play violin, standing in the parking lot, listening through the open auditorium doors. The Pachelbel Canon in D, the piece they'd practiced together when Emma was 9, and still believed her mother was magical. The FBI moved in during the final notes. This time, there was no bail. The federal holding facility was designed to break spirits. Gray walls, gray floors, gray food, gray futures. Rachel's cellmate was a surprise. Sarah Coleman. "Hello, Rachel," Sarah said from the bottom bunk. "Surprised to see me? Are you part of it too?" "No, I'm here because I got too close to the truth." Sarah sat up and Rachel saw bruises on her arms. "After you were arrested, I kept digging. Found something I wasn't supposed to." "What?" "Diane Morrison, Michael's mother. She's the real power behind everything." "Michael runs the company." "Michael's a puppet. Always has been. Diane built the empire before he was even born, using her first husband's life insurance money. The husband she murdered." Sarah pulled out a small device from her shoe, a recorder no bigger than a pill. "She visits tomorrow, wants to gloat. If we can get her talking." "Why would she talk to us?" "Because she thinks we're beaten. Destroyed. She loves to explain her brilliance to defeated enemies." Sarah's eyes were hard. "My husband found out about her 20 years ago. That's why he really disappeared. She had him killed." Diane Morrison arrived at the federal holding facility like royalty visiting peasants. At 70, she moved with the confidence of someone who'd never been denied anything. Her Chanel suit was impeccable, her jewelry understated, but worth more than most people's homes. The guards gave her privacy without being asked. Money's privilege extended everywhere. "Rachel," she said, settling into the metal chair as if it were a throne, "you look terrible. Prison doesn't suit you." Rachel had prepared for this meeting, coached by Sarah through the night. She needed to appear broken, defeated, ready to hear why she'd lost. It wasn't hard to fake. She felt all of those things. But underneath was something else, a cold fury that had been building for years. "Why?" Rachel asked, making her voice small. "I never did anything to you, Diane." "Didn't you?" Diane examined her manicured nails. "You made my son weak. All that domestic bliss, those cozy family dinners, making him think he needed a partner. Michael was meant to be a king, not a husband. I helped build the company." "You helped, yes, but you also held him back. Your middle-class morality, your insistence on legitimacy. Do you know how much faster the empire could have grown without your constant hand-wringing about legality?" Rachel let tears fall, real ones. "The FBI says I'm looking at 25 years. 25 if you're lucky. My lawyers are pushing for 30. Diane leaned forward. "You should have stayed in your place, dear. Wives are meant to be decorative, supportive, silent. You tried to be important." "Like you stayed silent?" Diane laughed and delighted. "Oh, I was never a wife. I was a black widow. Poor Harold, my first husband, never saw it coming. Heart attack at 42. So tragic. The insurance money was substantial, 10 million in today's dollars." "You killed him?" "Digitalis in his coffee every morning for 6 months. Undetectable after the fact. Mimics natural heart failure." Diane's eyes gleamed with remembered pleasure. "He was my practice run. After that, competitors who got too close, inspectors who wouldn't be bought, anyone who threatened what I was building." "How many?" 12 personally, maybe 20 more indirectly. Robert Coleman was one of the indirect ones. I didn't pull the trigger, but I made the call." Rachel forced herself to stay calm, to play the defeated victim. "Michael doesn't know?" "Michael knows what I tell him to know. He thinks he's ruthless, but he's soft. That cyber attack on your little computer project. I had to clean up his digital fingerprints myself. Sloppy, emotional, obvious. He gets that from his father." "You killed Michael's father too?" "Harold was Michael's father. But yes, I killed him too. Michael was 2, young enough to forget, old enough to inherit." Diane stood, smoothing her skirt. "You could have been my successor, Rachel. You had the intelligence, the drive, but you chose love over power. Fatal mistake. I chose my daughter." Same thing. Children make us weak. I never made that mistake with Michael. He was an investment, not a love object. She moved toward the door, then paused. Enjoy your cage, dear. It's where mice belong when they try to play with lions. After she left, Sarah pulled out the recorder, every word captured perfectly. She just confessed to multiple murders. Sarah breathed. Will it be enough? It's not legally obtained. It doesn't matter. We leak it to the press. Once it's public, the FBI has to investigate. That night, they used their one phone call strategically. Sarah called a journalist at the Wall Street Journal who'd been investigating Morrison development for years. The recording would be in her hands by morning. The story broke 3 days later. The matriarch of murder, Diane Morrison's recorded confession. The FBI raids happened simultaneously across 3 states. Diane was arrested at her Beacon Hill mansion, Michael at his office, Marcus Thompson at his club. The evidence, once they started really looking, was overwhelming. But the biggest surprise came during the investigation. Ashley Winters walked into the FBI field office and revealed her true identity. SEC undercover investigator, embedded 3 years ago after her sister lost everything in a similar real estate scheme. I needed to confirm the full extent of the conspiracy, she testified. The necklace, Rachel's grandmother's necklace, was the test. When Michael gave it to me, claiming he'd bought it, I knew he was capable of anything. The federal courthouse in Manhattan had never seen such media coverage. 300 journalists packed the steps as the verdicts were read. Michael Morrison, 25 years federal prison, no possibility of parole for 15 years. The judge's words rang through the courtroom. Mr. Morrison, you didn't just commit financial crimes. You weaponized the justice system itself, turning courts into instruments of domestic abuse. 25 years. Michael's face went white. For the first time in his life, his money couldn't save him. As the marshals cuffed him, he looked for his mother. She wasn't there. Marcus Thompson, the FBI's investigation revealed Marcus wasn't just Michael's accomplice. He'd been running parallel schemes for a decade. When they searched his Tribeca office, they found evidence of 12 other women he'd helped the same way, all framed for their ex-husband's crimes. Mr. Thompson, the judge said, you are a predator who hunted vulnerable women at their lowest points. 20 years. But the real shock came when the marshals announced both defendants will serve their time at Rikers Island, general population. No club fed, no minimum security, no special treatment. Michael and Marcus would share a cell block with men who'd lost everything to predatory landlords and corrupt developers. Men with nothing left to lose and very long memories. Diane Morrison never made it to trial. The night after her confession was broadcast nationally, she was found in her cell at 3 a.m. Heart attack, the exact same way she'd killed her first husband. The prison cameras mysteriously malfunctioned for exactly 12 minutes. The autopsy found traces of digitalis in her system, but the source was never determined. The investigation concluded it was self-administered. Sarah Coleman, when asked for comment, simply said, "Poetic justice has its own timeline." But the most powerful moment came during asset forfeiture hearings. The government seized everything: Morrison Development, Thompson Properties, all offshore accounts, every hidden asset. The total, $1.2 billion. Rachel was awarded $100 million as a whistleblower. But more importantly, Emma's college fund, the one Grandma Ellen had protected, remained untouched. And the judge made one more ruling. Given the extraordinary circumstances and documented manipulation, custody is immediately and permanently reversed. Emma Morrison may choose her living arrangement. Emma stood in the courtroom looking between the gallery where Ashley Chen, whose real name was Agent Ashley Williams, even her fake identity had been fake, sat with the FBI team, and where Rachel stood with Sarah. I choose my mother, Emma said clearly. I choose the woman who lost everything to protect me, even when I couldn't see it. 6 months later, the Mother's Justice Foundation occupied 3 floors of a Manhattan building, bought with the seized assets from Morrison Development. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Rachel stood at the ribbon cutting, Emma beside her, their hands intertwined. This building, Rachel said into the microphones, used to launder money for criminals. Now it will launder pain into power, victims into victors. The crowd erupted, but the moment that went viral, The clip that got 12 million views in 48 hours was Emma taking the microphone. My father is serving 25 years in Rikers. My grandmother died in custody. They thought they owned the world, but my mother, the woman they called crazy, the woman they tried to erase, she's standing here free. She won. We won. And if you're watching this, trapped in your own nightmare, know this. Your Michael Morrison will fall. Your Diane Morrison will be exposed. Your time is coming. Michael Morrison was attacked in Rikers 3 months into his sentence. He survived, but lost the use of his right hand, the one he'd used to sign all those forged documents. He now works in the prison laundry, earning 37 cents an hour. Marcus Thompson didn't last 6 weeks. The men he'd helped evict, the families he'd destroyed, they remembered. He requested protective custody after the first beating. Denied, he spent the last year in the medical wing. Rachel Morrison, now legally Rachel Vance again, doesn't think about them at all. She's too busy. The foundation helps 300 women every month. The Morrison method, using forensic accounting to expose financial abuse, has become the gold standard in divorce proceedings. Emma is at Columbia now, pre-law instead of pre-med. I want to be the lawyer my mother should have had, she says. And every morning, Rachel makes coffee in her Brooklyn brownstone, bought with her own money, earned through her own work, and reads letters from women who've escaped their own versions of Michael Morrison. The coffee tastes like victory.